In today's video, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what it looks like to be a math major at specifically the community college level, because I have a lot of experiences with a lot of different community colleges, so I have a good idea of what you would do your first day of math in community college all the way through your last day. I can't speak for four-year schools or university of what your first 2 years might look like, but at a community college, you're going to get pretty much from here to here with some variation and different starting placements. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what those starting placements might look like where your starting point is in the series, and what each of these books will teach you in your time as a math major at a community college. So we're going to go through each one of these books. Let's get going. First book I have is called Basic College Mathematics by Elaine Martin Gay. The next book I'm going to show after this one is by the same author, and I love this author. I love the books that she writes. I think they're done really well, and I'll talk more about that when I get to the next one. But this book here is for what's usually called basic college math or beginning math, like that kind of term. It's the lowest math class that a community college will offer, other than most community colleges have like GED classes. But this is the lowest class. This is for students who sometimes don't have a placement score, or they didn't take the placement test, or they tried to take the placement test and they got up and left midway through, or they just didn't, there's a language barrier sometimes between them and the placement test, so they get put into this class. So I'm not going to go too far into this book, but this is the lowest level class that a community college offers if you are going to be a math major. And just some contents here, just real quick. Whole numbers, integers, and introduction to variables. And then we have fractions and mixed numbers, decimals, ratio, proportions, percentages, reading graphs, introduction to algebra. So as you can tell, this is very introductory content. It's pretty much like 5th to 6th grade level mathematics. So this is for students who, again, don't have any sort of placement score available. They will get placed into this class. I've had students get placed into this class that should not have been there because they just didn't take the placement exam, and they essentially wasted an entire semester. So if you are somebody who's going into college and you don't want to take that placement test and you're just going to start at the bottom, take the time, take it, because you don't want to spend a whole entire semester in this class if you don't need to. So that's the lowest level math that a community college will offer. Now I'm going to go to the next book. Next book is Beginning and Intermediate Algebra by, again, Elaine Martin Gay. This book is actually 2 courses into one. So let me take a look. This is going to be the class that you would take immediately after that last one. A lot of students will get placed either into the first half of this book, which is called Beginning Algebra, or the second half of this book, which is called Intermediate Algebra. But these are very high in-demand classes, these 2 sections. So if you're in the beginning algebra half of it, what you're going to do is you're going to cover real numbers, you're going to cover equations, inequalities, and problem solving. So this is solving equations right here, chapter 2. Then chapter 3, you're going to get into some graphing. Chapter 4, Chapter 4 is solving systems of linear equations. So that's graphing, substitution, and elimination, which they call addition in this book. Chapter 5, exponents. Chapter 6, factoring. And then that's usually right around chapter 5, chapter 6. That's usually where the beginning algebra class will end. And then you'll get into intermediate algebra, which would be rational expressions and inequalities and absolute value, functions, rational exponents, radicals, and complex numbers, quadratic equations, like completing the square and quadratic formula. And then you might get into some exponential and logs. Some schools might get into that. I've never gotten into conic sections or sequences, series, and binomial theorem when I've taught intermediate algebra. That just might be the school that I've been at teaching this class, but I've never gotten into that. But you should hopefully get into chapter 12 a little bit, definitely chapter 11. But I love this book. I really do. I love the presentation style. There's a lot of nice visuals, a lot of color to it. It's exciting. It's really up to date. There's a brand new edition that just came out. This is the 7th edition. I think this might be the newest edition. But it's a really good book. And what I like most about it, let me go to chapter 7, Rational Expressions, because this is my favorite chapter. Okay, so in rational expressions, what I like about this book so much is the exercises, and this is just isn't for chapter 7, but the exercises are extremely fair. And I like that because I can assign like number 1, number 3, number 5, like these first couple problems, and they will get a firm understanding of the concept. And then like problems like number 7 here, the students will get a firm understanding of the concepts going in like 7, 9, 11. And then once you get into a little bit deeper, they get a little bit more difficult. So you're able to challenge other students along with reinforcing what we need to get done. And all the sections are set up like this. And I think the author of this book, Martin Gay, just really nailed that ability to hit all different learning levels in that classroom. And it's really beneficial because I could really mix it up with the homework that I assign. And the explanations are great too in this book. They give a lot of examples. Like there's sometimes, like this one alone, 10 different examples in this section alone. Just 10 examples. That's a lot. It's a lot of examples. And then you got all the exercises. So this is, again, for 2 classes. This whole book you'll use for 2 different classes. So these are developmental, beginning and intermediate algebra. If you place into this class, that doesn't mean that you're bad at math or anything like that. So I don't want you to get the mindset that like, oh, I'm in this developmental class, I'm not even getting college credit for that. How am I ever going to be a math major? Like, don't think like that. That's not a very good attitude to have. I've had plenty of students take both of these classes, beginning and intermediate algebra, and go on to major in math and computer science and you name it, doing just fine. So don't be mentally defeated if you place into this class. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You can still be successful in mathematics. You quite honestly, like, you might even be better off taking at least intermediate algebra just to freshen up on a lot of those skills. So it is not a bad thing to go into that class. So after you take beginning and intermediate algebra, if needed, then you will need to go to college algebra. So college algebra, I'm going to talk about this book. This is a book by Blitzer. So this class, excuse me, this is another potential entry point into the sequence. So if you don't need developmental, you've taken your placement score or some sort of high school credit transfers over, and you've placed into college algebra. So this is what you would look like in college algebra. College algebra, I like to think of it as intermediate algebra, just a little bit harder and a little bit more fast-paced. And you'll notice the review chapter is factoring, rational expressions, radical and rational exponents, scientific notation, like that kind of stuff. Like that's all intermediate algebra content. And then you get chapter 1, which is looking at equations and inequalities. Intermediate algebra, just the problems are a little bit harder. Functions and graphs, intermediate algebra, problems a little bit harder. Same thing here, rational expressions, pretty much are rational functions. And then logs, systems of inequalities. Here, that's partial fractions. Like that's definitely not intermediate algebra, at least from what I've seen. Partial fractions, and then matrices. This is starting around like chapter 5-ish is where it really starts to become college algebra. Like you might look at some of this in intermediate algebra depending on the school you're at or the teacher, but matrices definitely college algebra there. And then here's that conic sections again that I was talking about that I never got to in intermediate algebra. You'll for sure do in college algebra. And then hopefully you get to some sequences and probability in your college algebra class, but I did not get to really a lot of that when I taught college algebra. A couple times I did. So this is college algebra. Blitzer, great author too. Another really great book that I like. Same type of excitement level with how this book is presented. Like the examples are great. Like just this random problem that I just opened up to. Look at this. This is really, really cool. Like fully worked out explanation, step 1, step 2, everything's there. This whole example takes up almost an entire page, pretty much the entire page. And then you get on the next page, like another example with all these steps. So the book is really done well. This is another newer edition. This is the 8th edition. I think this was pretty new. And same thing that I said about the Martin Gay books. Blitzer does a really good job of starting off the sections or starting off like the exercise chunks as more manageable problems with not so much difficulty. Like this, number 7 and number 9, like, yeah, they're a little bit, they're not super easy, but they're challenging enough where students are going to be challenged and learn the concepts and master the concepts. And then when you get into like number 13 and then into these, that's when it starts to get really challenging. Like if you look over here at like 31, like, wow, look at that problem. Those type of problems I'll usually do in class, like at the end of class if we have some time and I want to see like exactly who can do what. I might give like some problems like this, and you get like maybe a student or two who can do it at the end of class, which is the whole point, you know. I want to see who's really mastering it first day or second day. And then here's even more exercises. So I really like this book. This is College Algebra by Blitzer. And I was just looking at even the review chapter, but that's just a review chapter. Like that was just explanations just for a review. So you can imagine how detailed the actual content is and the actual work. Just kind of flipping through. Colorful again, a lot of examples, a lot of exercises. Really great book. Ooh, that's exciting. So this is another potential entry points into the mathematics sequence, college algebra. So I do, before I talk about the next book, I do want to point something out. So this is college algebra. So two classes that you absolutely need before you take calculus is college algebra and trig. So depending on what you're doing in high school, you might be good for college algebra, or you might even be good for trig, and then you might even just first day go right into calculus. That doesn't happen often. Very specific things need to take place in order for you to do that, but most likely you're probably going to place into college algebra or trig, or even maybe intermediate algebra, but these classes are needed. When I was in college, I was able to take both college algebra and trig at the same time. I think they've changed that though in some states. So depending on what state you are in, you might not be able to do that, or you might be able to. I don't know, but I was able to do that because for me, my path looked like this. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So my first semester, I took a gen ed math class. So it didn't count towards anything in any sort of math sequence. And then midway through the semester, I decided to become a math major. And in order to get out of community college with Calc 3 completed to transfer and be on track, I had to get college algebra, trig, Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3. So I had to double up on these in the spring, Calc 1 summer, Calc 2 fall, Calc 3 spring. And then I was out in 2 years. So I did have to double up. And that's okay. Like there's no overlap in this content. So if you're able to double up and you're in a position where you're like, I really want to just knock out some classes, double up on these. So while I'm talking about trig, let's take a look at this trig book. So trig is usually 3 credit hours, where your college algebra and calculus classes are going to be 4, maybe even 5 credit hours. I'm not going to go too deep into this trig book, just a lot of trig. Trig functions, right triangles, radians, graphs of functions, and so on. So I'm not going to go too deep into the trig book. It's exactly what you expect. A lot of trig, a lot of trigonometry. And this book is by a number of different people: Lyle, Hornsby, Schneider, and Daniels. I have not personally taught out of this book. I just kind of have it on my bookshelf from a coworker. But you get the idea. It's just a trig book. But I do want to now go to calculus, because that's a big one. So here's a calculus book. This is the Larson book. There is two, I don't want to say this for sure, but if you're in community college or in college, you're probably either going to be using the Larson book or some other book like the Stewart book, potentially. But Larson is a very popular textbook. A lot of colleges use it. But I do know a lot of colleges also use the Stewart calculus book, but I've used the Larson book both as a teacher and as a student. So I really like this book. So this big giant book here, this is 3 semesters worth of content into a single book. So this is going to go through some life experiences, I'll tell you that much. The very first page, you have a whole page right here of derivatives and integration that could actually rip out. So I know physical books aren't really a thing much anymore. I know a lot of students just buy the e-text, so this isn't really, like, you really don't care, but it's kind of cool that this rips out, so that way you could just carry it with you everywhere. But this is calculus. So this is 3 semesters of Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3. So let me break up into what your Calc 1 class might look like. So Calc 1 is going to be limits, differentiation, applications of differentiation, integration, and I think, Yeah, you'd probably do chapter 5 here. Kind of depends. Sometimes, like, a lot of this gets sliced out and put into Calc 2. Sometimes it's in Calc 1, so depending on your school. But that's pretty much where Calc 1 will end. And then Calc 2 will start actually at chapter 7. I know it's chapter 6 is differential equations. And then chapter 7 is where you'll start Calc 2, which is, it's always rough starting Calc 2 because you're starting right in the middle of the book. Just like intermediate algebra, you're starting right in the middle of the book. I always have to tell the students at the beginning of intermediate algebra, like, hey, like, we're starting midway through. So the book thinks you know all of this beforehand. So if you're starting Calc 2 for whatever weird reason, like you took Calc 1 and then 5 years later you came back to college and now you're in Calc 2, the book doesn't care. The book thinks that you know Calc 1, so we're going to go into it. We're going to do area of region between two curves, volume, disk method, shell method. Like, this is rough. Right from the very first couple days here, you're doing this kind of content. So if you're going into Calc 2, brush up on your integration and derivatives and everything, and really just become a monster at it because the book doesn't care. The book thinks you're really good at it if you're in Calc 2. Then you get into some improper integrals, infinite series, conics, parametric equations, polar coordinates. If you're in a business calc class, funny enough, like, you'll actually do some of this in a business calc, like area between two curves, some, what was it? Improper integrals you might do in a business calc class. Yeah, so business calc is kind of weird. It's like this mix between Calc 1 and Calc 2. But so that's Calc 2. Calc 2, you'll probably get through chapter 9 in Calc 2. And then maybe chapter 10, depending on your teacher, depending on the school. And then this is Calc 3. Vectors, functions, separate variables, multiple integration. If it's one thing I remember from Calc 3, it's I remember doing triple integrals a lot, or double integrals. Those were my favorite part about Calc 3, so that's what I remember the most. But multiple integration is really fun. And then, not too sure. I can't remember if we got into vector analysis or not. I feel like we did, but I really don't remember. I can't give you a firm... Yeah, we did. Yeah, I remember some of that. Yeah, we did. So that's this whole book. 3 classes worth of content. These books, this calc book, isn't as exciting as the Blitzer or the Martin Gay Intermediate Algebra and College Algebra book, to be honest. It's just really... It's calculus, you know? It's not any less exciting or anything, but the presentation isn't as fun and colorful and popping out of the pages and everything. Like, it's a lot of just like, here's a bunch of integrals and that's fine, you know. And maybe it's just like Blitzer and Martin Gay are trying to capture the students in those classrooms, like especially those developmental level intermediate algebra or beginning algebra students who probably have some bad experiences with math, so you're trying to make it a little bit more exciting. We're here to do calculus, so let's just do calculus, and you kind of have your own fun with it. But I like this book. I was a student out of this book and a teacher out of this book, so I'm pretty familiar with it, and it's been around for a long time, so I'm sure you'll have your run-ins with it, but nothing really too exciting to say other than that. There's a lot of examples, though, that's for sure. A lot of examples. I'm in chapter 12. Let's look at... Oh, I do like their... What was it, chapter 7? Yeah, I do like their visuals for the disk and shell. So I actually want to show that. So here are the couple visuals they have for the disk and shell method, or this is the disk method, but as you flip through like the washer, they have really good visuals. I remember really liking these visuals as a student and as a teacher. As a teacher, trying to incorporate these visuals and show like the rotation and everything, because it's a very three-dimensional concept and it's hard to see on a piece of paper, but they do a really good job actually of showing how to visualize the revolution around the axis and understand like what are we actually taking the area of, like what are we actually trying to calculate. So these are really good visuals. I like that. Cool. All right, so that's Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, and then to finish off this video, I'm briefly going to talk about differential equations. This is like, you gotta just kind of know your college that you're at, if you will need this book or not, or this class or not. I was able to escape out of my community college without having to take it at the time, out of my community college at least, so I didn't need it to get out of my community college to transfer on time. And most colleges probably won't care if you don't take that class with like the college, because most colleges really want you to take Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, all at the same college to make sure that you're covering all the concepts, because like I said, some people mix them up, mix and match. So they don't want that to happen. They want you to take it all in one consistent sequence at one school. So this is differential equations. This isn't, I think usually this is 3 credit hours, but Calc 1 might be 4 or 5 credit hours, probably 4. But you just get your differential equations content. Not a lot to say about this book. I taught out of this book. I honestly don't remember much about it. It was like 4 years ago at this point, and it was all online. So I just recorded a bunch of videos and stuff, and really knew this book in and out then, but I have not looked at it since. So I can't really give a whole lot of opinions. There's a lot of differential equations books out there, but from what I remember from it, I liked it. It was good. It has a Pearson, like exercises with it, so you can do some extra practice and stuff with that. So that's really nice to have, especially at that level of differential equations. So that's your map to everything majoring in math at a community college. And there's, of course, a bunch of different classes that you can take as a student at a community college. But if you're going to major in math, everything I just laid out is probably going to be the route that you take. So you're going to take beginning intermediate algebra, college algebra, trig, and then your calcs. So hope this video helps. Good luck on your community college journey.